Americans still have this problem, obviously, of being respected. I don't care what anyone says when you go abroad. If you have an American accent or an American passport, sometimes people put you down. They don't think you're as good as what the British are, the German are, the Spanish, Italians. You always have to fight that fight.
Should I stay or should I go is the song for these American players, becoming increasingly common now for US men's national team players to head over to Europe rather than choose to ply their trade in MLS. We've got 7 in the Premier League, 7 in Germany as well, just 4 in Italy and Serie A, 3 playing in French football in Liga, another 3 playing in the EFL Championship, so I suppose 10 overall in England. In Eredivisie, you've got a couple, and then just the 1 in La Liga. So we thought we'd have a discussion. We'll come up to the wall, have a discussion, Ian, about whether it's the right call for these players. When we're looking just from the prism of the international team, as we look ahead to the World Cup, is it better for them to play in Europe or stay in MLS? So before we have that conversation, you've obviously played as a professional footballer in MLS and in America and in Europe at various levels as well. For those who don't know, what are the big differences, and are there any differences in terms of the style of play, the way that football is played over here in the States and back in Europe? I know that's a very broad question, but can you put an answer on it?
I mean, to answer, it's very different each league, and obviously if the higher up the divisions you go, it's much more competitive, and also is very dynamically different as well. If you were to play in the Bundesliga compared to Premier League, compared to La Liga, or even through the Italian Serie A, it's completely different styles, right? So I do think that it's determined on what player qualities you actually have as to which league is a better fit for you. For me personally, obviously, someone who grew up in the UK and was born in the United States of America, you know, I had the opportunity with 2 passports to be able to go wherever I wanted to across the EU, and therefore I chose to go to England. It didn't quite work out for me in my first club, but then the dream to go play in Germany was always there. But I did try at one stage as a US national team youth captain. I was captain of the under-18s, and of course we went through the World Youth Games and we were competing to try and get into the Olympics. And for me, it was trying to get closer to Major League Soccer, knowing that I was closer to the national team as a teenager. So for me, the football in Major League Soccer back then was still good enough quality where I believed that if I'd played well and stayed healthy, I would have got my opportunity in the national team maybe a little bit quicker than I was playing through the youth teams, trying to get into the first team in maybe a championship or a Bundesliga 2, or maybe even a top flight, and trying to play in one of those lower placed teams. But I obviously got, unfortunately, hit by injury and didn't pass my medical, and eventually was shipped back to Europe and had to start from the bottom again. But that happens, and I think now we're trying to find, okay, what's the best solution for our US national team stars to be able to get ready for a World Cup? That's the bigger question, more so than it is where do you begin your career, I think.
So which league prepares players better right now? Do you think they should be sticking in MLS or heading over to Europe? And if they are going to Europe, where should they be focusing on?
Listen, someone who's played in European football and played at a reasonably high level, but also played in Major League Soccer, now recognises that Major League Soccer is bigger and better than it's ever been before. There's more money involved, the facilities are there, there's an opportunity through academies where there's places for these young players to go play. Now we're recognising, okay, college football, is it important as it once was? I still think the development through college football is there, because there's a lot of great coaches in the college game. But the academies can also offer you a professional term where you can make some money and get maybe to the first team a little bit quicker, not having the hindrance of going through collegiate level to be able to get to the professional level, because nowadays these youngsters are so hungry and so eager, they want to get there earlier. I think sometimes you got to settle down. But there is so much money available to these young players in Major League Soccer. If you're a young American right now, top-class coaches, great facilities, and now a pay structure. I mean, me and Whitty called a game last week in Nashville against Philadelphia Union. 15-year-old started the game. 15-year-old who's making $500,000 a year. If that doesn't give you opportunity of hope for young Americans, I don't know what will. The dream will always be to go to Europe and try to play for one of these great clubs. You can still do that. But I think, and I honestly believe now, we are really ready with Major League Soccer, where the performance, the standard, the level across the board, finances, training, structure, coaches, is all ready for these young players to develop right and be able to push themselves closer to the national team at a younger age. And we're actually starting to see it with this recent Gold Cup.
In terms of shortcomings of staying in the MLS, one of those, as you say, is slowly being eliminated in terms of the money increasing, because that was one of the problems. If you weren't one of the designated or big-name players, you weren't earning anywhere near the kind of money you could go and make in Europe if you could get to a big club. Right. Are there any other issues that some of these players may have to consider about making that decision to stay?
I mean, let's talk money first and foremost, right? Back in my day, I can only tell you from my past experience. In 2008, when I first came back to Major League Soccer from the second Bundesliga, where I was playing for FC St. Pauli, I went to Real Salt Lake. The lowest salary then was $12,500 a year. There's nothing available.
Well, you'd make more of that in non-league in England, for example.
You could play non-league,
yeah.
And at 17, 18, 19 years old, you'd probably play. Americans still have this problem, obviously, of being respected. I don't care what anyone says when you go abroad. If you have an American accent or an American passport, sometimes people put you down. They don't think you're as good as what the British are, the German are, the Spanish, Italians. You always have to fight that fight. But there have been many players who are in the past who have already gone and done that. Let's go back through generations. Your Eric Wijnaldus, who at one point was leading goal scorer in the Bundesliga. Obviously, Claudio Reyna, one of my favourite players, had success in the Bundesliga, then went to Scotland and had tremendous success, had Premier League success. I mean, you could go down and on and on and on about some of the great names who have played in previous generations and created a platform to this recent generation. I mean, I only have to look at NYCFC, the nearest club, obviously, to our studios, and they have Gio Reyna, who came through their ranks. They have Joe Scally, who came through their ranks and obviously went on to have tremendous success. And for me, of course, Christian Pulisic will always be the biggest name, who maybe the one that got away. But for Gio and Joe, they've gone on to the Bundesliga and had tremendous success. They've had success. It's now about, can we translate that now to the national team? So for me, yes, we can go through each individual league and I'll tell you why it's good or bad for them to potentially go there. But the only thing I see holding them back is obviously the money. Because money abroad, you can get so much more. And of course, in MLS, they're still playing catch up. But right now, the lowest salary is getting closer to $100,000 a year. Don't forget that.
Exactly. And we see some players who make that call, they go over to Europe and then find themselves sat on the bench or in the reserve. So
yes.
I suppose the question moving on from that is, what's more important? The league you're playing in or playing time, actually playing as a footballer rather than just sitting on the bench?
Yeah, well, as in a World Cup year, obviously you want to be playing football first and foremost. I think when you're in these World Cup years, everyone starts to question. Let's take Gio Reyna, for example. Obviously not playing. He hasn't been healthy recently. He's had some issues, obviously, with the national team previous coach, and now he's trying to sort of rebuild his career. And maybe a move to Major League Soccer, and what I'm hearing is LAFC might be the place for him to go to obviously be right in front of Pochettino's face, to be able to put those performances out. And Major League Soccer right now can give him those performances. They can give him time, and if he remains healthy, he'll play for the national team because he's one of the most talented players we have in our roster. But right now, across the board, it's about minutes, right? Bundesliga, for me, obviously the closest one to my heart, will always give you an opportunity because it's a league that gives opportunities to create stars. And I think we've recognised over the years that so many players, Kevin Paredes, obviously someone who we should be speaking about a little bit more, obviously Aronson as well, who's gone over and had success as well. I think Christian Pulisic going to the Bundesliga, then being sold to the Premier League, and now obviously in Italian football, has been the biggest success out there because you can have success and play minutes in the Bundesliga ahead of a World Cup. For me, the Bundesliga is the most important league for young American players. There's also a little tweak in the passport issue. If you're an American, you don't have an EU sort of connection, you can still get over to the Bundesliga a little bit easier. So therefore, Bundesliga teams, German teams in particular, maybe Bundesliga 2 or 3, where there is a lot of money and good playing time, still very viable option.
Used to be an agent. You mentioned the Pochettino factor there. Obviously, he's plied the trade for most of his managerial career in Europe for these big teams. Does that have any impact on it? Has he mentioned in press conferences, talked about the fact of perhaps needing to pay a bit more attention to MLS, which is a league that he didn't have as much knowledge of prior to taking this job? Is there, for some of these players, is that a factor that's going to play in ahead of the World Cup?
I'm sure he's changed his mind over what happened in the Gold Cup most recently, when some of the European players couldn't play for injury reasons or decided not to play for personal reasons. I'm sure he's now a bigger fan of the domestic league because of that, and Major League Soccer allowing their players to go compete for the national team. I think Pochettino would love them to play at the highest level, but I also think he's got a greater understanding of Major League Soccer, and now probably a greater respect in Major League Soccer, because obviously fellow Argentinians are starting to arrive into the league, including the greatest of all time, and making a big name for himself here stateside. So commercialization, there's a great deal of opportunity in Major League Soccer for these players to play and also make a great deal of money as well. So for Pochettino in particular, I just think he wants players to play. If you're playing well, let's take Diego Luna, for example. example, for Real Salt Lake, and he is scoring goals. He's already proven in the national team that he'll run through a brick wall for you. He's got that heart and he's got that passion. He's got that diversity within him. I think he's still in the same position as a Christian Pulisic is. And Christian's probably the most talented player in the whole group. And playing at AC Milan, he's got a lot of pressure now on his shoulders from Pochettino. You better have a good season. I still think he'll be at the World Cup and leading at the World Cup, certainly with his performances. But I still think there's an even sort of keel from Pochettino now. Doesn't matter which league you're in, play well, show me how good you are, you're in.